Tomorrow morning, you will trade your time for money. You will do it again the next day, and the day after that. You will call this building a future. But the families who have held wealth for 3, 4, 5 generations, they never made that trade. What they did instead looks uncomfortable from the outside. It looks, depending on who is talking, almost unethical, but it is entirely legal. And it is the single most effective capital strategy that the financial education industry almost never teaches you directly. This is about the architecture of generational wealth, not the surface-level advice, not the budget spreadsheets, the actual structure underneath the dynasties. Here is what nobody wants to say out loud. The wealthiest families in any economy do not build wealth by earning more. They build it by making the rules of wealth work asymmetrically in their favor, and then passing those asymmetries down. Think about your own financial life right now. Every dollar you earn gets taxed before it reaches your hands. Then it gets taxed again when you spend it. Then, if you manage to grow anything, it gets taxed a third time when you try to move it. The wealthy do not live inside that loop. They engineered an exit from it generations ago. Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying how human beings make financial decisions. His core finding was not that people are stupid, it was that people are predictable. And predictable behavior in a financial system always benefits the entity that designed the system. The average earner follows the rules without ever reading who wrote them. So who wrote them? The foundational wealth-building framework that every dynastic family uses has 3 pillars, and all 3 of them are called unethical by people who have never had access to them. The first pillar is the separation of income from labor. In almost every household in any country, income equals labor. You stop working, the money stops. This is not a law of physics. It is a conditioned financial behavior that most people never examine. The wealthy figured out centuries ago that labor is the least efficient generator of capital. Assets generate income without your presence. Equity compounds while you sleep. Royalties land in accounts whether you are awake or on a beach on the other side of the world. Warren Buffett described it clearly. If you do not find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. But here is the part that never makes the motivational quote cards. The mechanism for making money while you sleep is not available equally. It requires an initial asset position. And the families who hold generational wealth started with one. This is the part that makes people uncomfortable. The wealthy did not simply work harder or think smarter. They inherited a starting position inside the asset economy. And then they protected that position, aggressively, legally, structurally, from everyone outside it. The second pillar is the weaponization of debt. Debt, in the consumer financial world, is an anchor. It is the mechanism by which income is redirected from the earner back to the lender. Credit card balances, auto loans, mortgages structured to front-load interest. Consumer debt is the most effective wealth transfer system ever designed, from the borrower to the lender. But the wealthy do not use debt the same way. They use it as a lever. When a wealthy family borrows against an asset, a building, an equity portfolio, a business stake, they are not buying a liability. They are unlocking liquidity from an asset that continues to appreciate while they deploy the borrowed capital elsewhere. The asset grows. The borrowed money works. And because loans are not income, they pay no tax on the liquidity they just accessed. This is sometimes called the buy, borrow, die strategy. It is not a conspiracy. It is a feature of the tax code that any accountant can confirm. Buy assets. Borrow against them at low interest instead of selling. Hold until death, at which point the cost basis resets for your heirs and the embedded capital gains, potentially decades of appreciation, disappear legally. The reset at death is called a step-up in basis. It has existed in the United States tax code in some form since 1921. It is not hidden. It is simply never discussed in schools, in most financial media, or in the advice given to middle-income earners, because it is only structurally useful once you are already inside the asset economy. John Bogle, founder of Vanguard and architect of the index fund revolution, spent his career trying to give ordinary investors access to asset class returns. His core argument was that the market's gains belong to everyone who participates consistently over time. But participation requires capital, and capital requires an initial position. The step up in basis means that a family who entered the asset economy 2 generations ago has accumulated a tax advantage that compounds across every decade, entirely separate from their investment returns. That gap is not closable by earning more. It is only closable by restructuring where income comes from and how assets are held. The third pillar is entity architecture. The wealthy do not hold their assets as individuals. They hold them inside structures, trusts, holding companies, family limited partnerships, charitable vehicles with retained control. These structures are not just legal protections. They are tax environments. They are succession tools. They are walls. A trust can hold a business for 100 years, distributing income to heirs according to rules written before any of those heirs were born. A family limited partnership can discount the value of transferred assets, reducing gift and estate taxes on the transfer of wealth to the next generation. A charitable remainder trust can generate an income stream, a tax deduction, and a legacy simultaneously. None of this is illegal. All of it is technical, and all of it requires professional infrastructure, attorneys, accountants, fiduciaries, that represents a meaningful fixed cost. That cost is the barrier, not the strategy itself. The strategy is available in the tax code. The barrier is that building the infrastructure costs money that most families do not have liquid and prioritized toward wealth architecture. Thomas Piketty spent years documenting the mathematical structure of wealth inequality in his research on capital and returns. His central finding: when the return on capital exceeds economic growth, wealth concentrates, always, inevitably. Not because the wealthy are more intelligent or more hardworking, but because capital in motion compounds faster than labor income can grow. That dynamic, capital outrunning labor, is not a bug in the economic system. It is a design output. And the families who sit inside the capital economy use entity architecture to ensure that their position in that dynamic is permanent and inheritable. Now here is the part that most financial channels skip entirely. None of this requires that you start with a dynasty. It requires that you start restructuring your financial life around the same principles at whatever scale you currently have access to. The separation of income from labor does not require millions. It begins with your first asset, a dividend-producing index position, a rental unit, a royalty-generating creative output, something that generates a return without your direct labor attached to every dollar it produces. The weaponization of debt begins with understanding the difference between productive leverage and consumer leverage. One builds a position, the other drains one. You can begin making that distinction today in your current financial life without any change in income. The entity architecture begins, for most people, with a simple conversation with an estate attorney and a CPA about whether a trust or an LLC structure makes sense for what you already own. Most people never have that conversation, not because it is inaccessible, because they do not know to ask for it. This is the actual secret that the dynastic wealth families have always known. It is not that the rules are rigged, it is that most people play the game without ever reading the rule book. And the rule book is public. It is sitting in the tax code, in estate law, in the structure of financial instruments that have been available for decades. The wealthy call this stewardship. Critics call it systemic advantage. Both are correct. What you call it matters less than whether you begin to understand the architecture and then begin building your version of it, one decision at a time, starting with what you have right now. Tomorrow morning, you will still wake up. The question is whether you spend that morning trading your time for money, or whether you spend 1 hour of it learning how to make your money trade itself. That is the difference. That has always been the difference.